Welcome to Professor Pincushion. This tutorial will show you how to make a cute sleep mask from a free downloadable pattern you can get from our website. A link will be in the description. For supplies, you'll need a 1/4 yard of both flannel and fleece, some assorted felt squares for making the face, a 1/2 yard of 1/4 inch wide elastic, and some all-purpose thread.
Here's the pattern piece. Basically copied it from the piece of paper that it was originally printed out on, just because tissue paper is a little bit easier to deal with. It's easier to get the pins through. So all I have to do is just use a scrap piece of tissue paper. This is also a scrap piece of fabric that I had because you really don't need that much fabric to do this project. So this is going to be my backing, and I'm basically going to cut one out of my backing of this pattern, one out of my fleece, which is going in between, and then one out of my front. So I'm going to go ahead and start pinning. And when you're pinning a pattern, remember that's always a good idea to put your pins horizontally into your pattern. This is so when you're cutting around it, you don't have to worry about going around pins or anything. So I'm just going to pin this all the way around. You're just going to pin and then smooth. And once I have this pin, I'm going to cut it out, and then I'm going to cut one of the fleece and then one of my front fabric. That's it. So now all three are cut. Now you'll notice on the pattern that there are some dots. You're going to want to transfer the dots to your front piece. What these dots represent is where you're putting the elastic, because we're stitching to the front. There's also a pair of X's. This is just a rough estimate of where you should put your eyes. So you can kind of eyeball it, but this is pretty centered. You just want to make sure if you do put eyes to put it far enough away from the edge, because when you consider your seam allowance, you don't want any part of that to get cut off. So I'm just taking the pins out here so I can remove my pattern. And I created, for this one I'm gonna do a cat eyes. So I just created a pattern for myself, which will be available on the website as well. And I've already cut the pieces out of felt here. So this one's kind of falling apart. Basically I just did the white, and then I did the black eyelid, and then a green iris, and then the pupil. So I have another one here. So basically what I'm going to do is hand sew all these pieces together and then sew it to the front. Once I have that, then we're going to put the elastic attached to the front. So I'm just going to go ahead and start hand sewing these. So you're basically going to be doing the same kind of stitch that I'm going to be showing you, which is a back stitch. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to poke the needle through, bring it all the way in, and bring it down in front of where you brought the needle out. The next stitch though, you're actually going to go up a bit, and then you bring it back to your previous stitch. So we go forward a little bit, and then bring it back. So these are the type of stitches I used in order to sew these other little pieces together. But now what I'm doing is I'm sewing the whole eye piece to the front of my mask. So now we're going to be putting on the elastic. Now the elastic, basically in order to measure it for your head, you're gonna put the elastic from one temple around the back of your head to your other temple, and basically just hold it there until it feels comfortably snug. You don't want it too loose, but you don't want it too tight either. So after I've cut it to what I think is the appropriate length, all I'm going to do is just pin it, because you also have to remember that there's going to be a 1/4 inch seam allowance when we're sewing this thing together, so you're going to lose about a 1/2 inch of your elastic once the whole thing is complete. So I'm matching up where I had previously put my dots for my pattern piece. And once you pin it very carefully, do is just flip it around like so, and then just try it on to see if it feels like it's going to be a good fit for you. If it feels a little loose, just cut a little bit more off. If it feels too tight, then you're probably going to have to cut another piece of elastic. So I've already tried it on. It felt like it was a good fit. So I'm just going to change my pins this way so I can go ahead and sew them on. All right, so for sewing, I'm gonna have a regular stitch. So a 2.5 stitch, and I'm just doing 1/4 inch seam allowance. And because the elastic's gonna get a lot of work, once you put the foot down, you could take your pin out and put it in the pin cushion. You know, you're gonna be putting over your head a lot. So you're gonna wanna make sure it's really in there. So not only are you going to back stitch, but what I would do would be to do the back stitch and keep going over your stitch. I would say at least 3 or 4 times, because you want to make sure this does not snap out. So the more secure in there, the better. So that's good enough. And then we're going to do the same thing over to this side. We're going to take our back piece and our middle piece and we're going to put them together. And basically for this step, we're going to baste these two pieces together. And basting is just doing a large stitch on your machine without back stitching, so you're not tying it. It's going to be a stitch that you're eventually just going to take out. But you want to have it secured, so you kind of only, if this piece is attached to this piece, it makes it a lot easier when you're adding another piece to it. So it's just, it keeps things tacked together. It just makes it a little easier when I put things together. So I put the needle down, I put the foot down. And the seam allowance here doesn't really matter because you're going to eventually just take it out. I'm going to switch my machine to a basting stitch, which is a 6 length, so it's a 6.0 length, or whatever the biggest stitch that your machine will do. And I'm not going to do a back stitch. I'm just going to go all the way around. And you'll find that the hardest part about making this mask, of course, is all the curves. So you're just going to want to go as comfortably as you can. If you find that you're going off your mark, just kind of lift your foot a little bit and pivot your fabric. Now we're putting all our pieces together. So here I have it sandwiched. Remember, the fleece is on the outside. Then you have your flannel facing the inside of your face, and then the raw inside of the felt here. So I folded up the elastic, I've lined it all up, and I'm just going to pin around the whole thing. Now you're going to have to flip this inside out, so I'm going to put an X where I want to start sewing, so all the way around, and then I'm going to put another X on this side because that's where I'm going to stop sewing, and flip the thing inside out. Make sure that you don't pick up any of the elastic that's in the middle. You got to make sure that stays free, so when you flip it inside out, you'll be able to wear it. All right, so now we have it under here. I'm going to start at my first X, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Get my thread here. Just try to keep your basting threads out of the way. That's kind of hard to do. Okay. So I'm going to put my needle down. And you can go ahead and take out your X when you're done. And this is the one where you're really going to try to be careful going around the curves, because you want it to be as neat as possible. So this time you're going to do the back stitch, because we don't want it to come undone on this. Okay. Just take your time. You don't have to rush. important thing is making it around those curves very well. You're just guiding it with your hand. You're not tugging it. Alright, so we're almost there. Well, once you get to it, you're going to want to backstitch. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I always put my gap at the top of the mask just because it's flat up here, so it's easier than trying to put it down here and trying to deal with a curve and a hole. So that's why I always put it at the top. This makes it a little easier for me. Alright, so I'm just going to backstitch again and finish that off. Alright, so before we flip it inside out, I'm going to trim off our threads here, but we're also going to trim the fleece. So I'm going to cut it down as close as I can. This is so when we're flipping it inside out, we don't want it to be all bulky right at the edge. So I'm going to trim this fleece. Then I'm going to cut out little triangle notches around all the curves. This just makes it when we flip it inside out, it's going to lay a little flatter, and I'm also going to trim my seam a little bit closer to my stitch here. So I'll show you how to do that. I've done the notched corners or edges all the way around the curved parts, and I've trimmed it. So now I'm ready for the fun part, which is flipping it inside out. So you're just gonna kind of, so there you go. So now the next step is we're going to tuck this in and pin it, because now we're going to hand sew this top part close, so we no longer have the hole. So you're just going to very carefully tuck it under and pin it. So we have this back side of the fabric folded. The gray fabric is folded inside. So basically what a slip stitch is all we're doing is taking a little bit from this side, then a little bit from the gray side, and then just go back and forth in a zigzag motion. Basically, you're just putting your needle and you're just grabbing a little bit on the inside of the fold. So your stitching is all taking place between these two fabrics, so inside the crack here. I'm just going to push my knot down a little bit because I don't want to see it. Alright, so I've grabbed a little bit of the back fabric. Now I'm going to go directly across, grab a little bit of the gray fabric on the inside of the fold, and just pull it through. And then you'll see it just pulls it shut, and if you do it right, you're not going to see the stitch holding the two fabrics together. So I'm going to continue doing this till I get to my last pin here, which is the end of my hole. So I finished sewing the top here, and now all I need to do is just take out my basting stitch here. So all you're going to do is take your seam ripper, slip it underneath one of the stitches, pull it through. The middle part is the sharpest part of the seam ripper. So just pull it and it should cut. I'm going to go to the next one, and all I'm going to do is just pull the thread through. So I'm going to go all the way around. And here we have the finished product. So here's some other examples of ones that I did just with eyes and eyelashes and stuff like that. But you can find the pattern and directions on the website if you want to have fun and make one yourself.
Our book, Professor Pincushin's Beginner Guide to Sewing, Garment Making for Nervous Newbies, is now available to order. Go to professorpincushion.com/books or click on the link in the description to see a list of vendors where you can purchase it.